This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
قبل بضعة أسابيع تبنى مجلس النواب في الكونغرس ب 395.
A few weeks ago, the House of Representatives passed a bill by a vote of 395 to 3. Bill number 2278 demanded that President Barack Obama submit a report to Congress about what was described as incitement to violence against the U.S. in the Middle East. The bill also encompasses northern African countries.
المعادي للولايات المتحدة في منطقة الشرق الأوسط التي قال القرار إنها تشمل أيضا دول الشمال الإفريقي.
The bill specifically named Al-Manar, Al-Aqsa, Al-Zawra, and Al-Rafadain television stations and comes at a time when Obama's political agenda, including the opening of a new chapter in U.S. relations with the Muslim world, is facing increasing challenges.
في العلاقات مع العالم الإسلامي كما يقول تحديات متزايدة.
The bill also comes at a time when some American right-wing elements continue their verbal campaigns against Islam, emulating Reverend Pat Robertson.
Islam is not a religion, it is
الإسلام ليس ديناً.
Islam is not a religion, it is a political system bent on world domination. Religion is a mask, used to extend their influence on the world and make it adapt to its way of thinking. They want a caliphate, as they had once before. They want all people to be subjected to Sharia law and to live under their domination. It is every bit as insidious as communism, perhaps more so.
ومن مقر الجزيرة في الدوحة المحلل السياسي خالد.
In this program, we will shed light on challenges facing the relations between the U.S. and the Muslim world amidst the recent media development.
خالد صفوري في الدوحة أنت كنت قد أشعرت.
Joining us from Al Jazeera's headquarters in Doha is Washington-based political analyst Khalid Safouri. Let us start with Khalid Safouri in Doha. He told Al Jazeera about Bill 2278 months before Congress even discussed it. Can you tell us about the background of this bill and who is behind it, according to the information you have?
According to my information, the draft bill was based on a report by the Congressional Research Services. It released a 27-page report on media channels that support extremism and terrorism in the Middle East, and particularly the stations that you have mentioned. Congressman Joseph Crowley from New York, along with other members of Congress, submitted the draft bill to the Foreign Policy Committee. It was presented, discussed, and was voted on in the committee, and then was presented to Congress in the summer of 2009 and was voted on. According to my information, the Congressional Research Services heavily relied on the reporting of the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI. Of course, MEMRI broadcasts segments and clips particularly from Al-Aqsa and Al-Manar television stations. Both Congress and the committee depended on MEMRI.
وبالتالي اللجنة والكونغرس حتى اعتمد عليها. نحن نعرف أنه MEMRI تقول.
We know that MEMRI says that it has an email list of 2 million people. Therefore, its message reaches a wide audience and has a great deal of influence on the American media and Congress.
تأثير كبير جدا.
MEMRI طبعا لها علاقات بخالد MEMRI.
We would like to remind our audience that MEMRI is linked in one way or another to Israel.
Without a doubt, it plays a parallel role to that of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC. AIPAC influences the U.S. Congress, and MEMRI influences American public opinion. Many of MEMRI's reports are adopted in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and other newspapers in the U.S., and stories are initiated because of a report from MEMRI, and that's how the voting came about.
The question of incitement, how do we define it? Even though Professor Asad Abu Khalil blamed Al Jazeera for using the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI, but MEMRI is part of the story. Now let us watch a clip from MEMRI aired on Al-Iraqiya TV.
شوف بابا أذكى 5 حاجات في الدنيا 3 الدم الفلسطيني روح بابا اشرب من دمهم وتعال بالسلامة من عين الخايب بابا وادي خريطة الخليل خوف تضيع ممكن تلزم يمكن بابا مش هتلزم لأنه أنا مش إلى عاد والضفة مش غزة يعني حط في بطنك بطيخة صيفي شالوم بابا سلام بابا أنا ضايع
خير يا بابا كيف تعرف؟
Khairi Abata, how do you define incitement?
هو استخدام
Incitement is to instigate violence against civilians or distort a certain religion or ethnicity. This is what incitement is against a group.
الآن المقطع الذي شاهدناه من تلفزيون الأقصى.
Now, this clip that we watched from Hamas's Al-Aqsa TV in Gaza, do you consider it to be an example of incitement?
ذلك نموذج من نماذج التحريض.
والله يوجد في تلفزيون الأقصى نماذج أخرى.
I swear there are more inciting examples on Al-Iraqiya TV, which clearly begs the question of inciting violence against civilians.
وحتى في فرنسا le Conseil de l'audiovisuel وهو مجلس الإعلام.
Even France's Audiovisual Council sent a warning to Al-Iraqiya TV because of their usage of inciting material.
تلفزيون الأقصى لأن استخدامهم
As for this particular clip, it is considered to be a light version in comparison to other inciting material shown on that TV station.
بروفيسور أسعد أبو خليل بناء على ما شاهدناه في المقطع قبل قليل.
Professor Asad Abu Khalil, according to what we just watched in the clip a little while ago, when does the view of one particular people of another people or nation change? At what point does it change from simply portraying the negative aspects of that nation to actually inciting against it? Of course, we're talking about Israel here.
ضد تلك الدولة والإشارة هنا طبعا إلى إسرائيل.
دعني أجيب أولا أن هناك الكثير في إعلام حماس مما لا يريقني.
Let me first say that there is a lot of material on Hamas's media that I don't like, but I will not comment on this clip because I refuse any credibility attributed to the crude memory propaganda organization. I have written in the past about intentional distortion and incitement in the translating and broadcast of a number of tapes from memory, but I will not comment on this tape that was just played. However, I am for resisting the hatred against Jews, Muslims, Christians, and Buddhists around the world. There should be an attempt to find an international way to broadcast love and the like, but investing in hatred and focusing on some political expressions, even if there is hatred in them, while exempting Israel and Israelis inciting propaganda from this matter, has a more suspicious goal.
Khalid Safuri, I now turn to you.
I
have a commentary to make about the American Congress that initiates legislation against incitement. There are some members of Congress who have said some things in relation to inciting terrorism or killing. A Colorado member of Congress, who was a candidate in the presidential election, Tom Tancredo, called for dropping nuclear bombs on Mecca in the case of another terrorist attack. There are many members of Congress who insult Muslims and Islam. In turn, if you were to talk about the language of hate, then you have to start by applying the same principle to yourself. We haven't heard any condemnation from Congress. We haven't heard any party, even the Republican Party. When one of its members, Tom Tancredo, presented himself as a candidate, the Republican Party did not expel him or even ask him to apologize. In truth, these matters are a problem in Congress, and another problem in the U.S. is the media. And not just Fox News. Radio stations in the U.S. transmit on a regular basis distasteful talk that is hostile to Muslims and incites violence against Muslims. You have to listen to not only Glenn Beck on Fox News, but also The Levin Show and other programs on the radio that are spread in the entire country and millions listen to them. So if Congress is interested in the issue of language of inciting hatred, then it has to start on working on this issue inside the U.S.
Kirkuk represents the first contact point in all Iraqi disputes in their various forms, ethnic and religious. The elections for the provincial councils did not start with a consensus from all parties, and now the parliamentary elections are also starting in a special manner.
12 مقعدا هي حصة كركوك في البرلمان المقبل يتنافس على تلك المقاعد.
Kirkuk will hold 12 seats in the future parliament. 498 candidates are competing in the elections, including 111 women. These candidates are from 27 political entities, including an independent party. The most prominent entities are the coalitions composed of Kurds, Turkmen, and Arabs. Other coalitions all use national slogans.
Besides the region's special quota of allocated seats, the candidates also compete within one electoral arena represented by the Iraqi public as a whole.
The electoral map in Kirkuk seems confusing to political observers, especially after some Kurdish leaders withdrew from their parties, and some Turkmen candidates merged into the list of Arab candidates. All this may affect people's expectations of the political scene.
They are going to drown out weaker voices on the list. For this reason, we believe that these alliances would harm the Arab representation, and we fear that.
I think that the candidates list is ethnically diverse. It represents the ambitions of the Kirkuk public.
The people of Kirkuk, hit by election fever, have their opinions about these alliances.
The personal cooperation between the Kurds, Arabs, and Turkmen goes hand in hand.
Whether they ally themselves with each other or not, we want to know what our future holds in Kirkuk.
The politicians here dispute the representation of the ethnic groups. Each of the three ethnic groups claims that it is the majority. Political observers see this dispute as a factor in possibly foiling efforts exerted by the politicians to gain their constituents' votes.
In Karbala, a symbolic funeral procession was held today for 23 martyrs, including a woman and 2 children, whose remains were discovered in a mass grave in the province. The mass grave was traced back to the reign of the tyrant Ba'ath regime.
The funeral procession, which was attended by Iraqi Minister of Human Rights Wijdan Mikhail, started at the headquarters of the Provincial Council and proceeded to the center of the city.
A symbolic funeral procession for 23 martyrs, including a woman and 2 children, was held today in Karbala. The remains of the martyrs were discovered in a mass grave traced back to the tyrant Ba'ath regime. It seems that the martyrs were killed in the 1991 Sha'ban uprising. With the participation of the Human Rights Ministry and the local government in Karbala, the residents held a symbolic funeral procession for the martyrs. The remains of the victims were finally laid to rest at the Martyrs Cemetery in Karbala.
The mass grave was discovered in Karbala. Today we held a funeral procession to honor the martyrs. The remains of nearly 23 victims were recovered from the grave. An official funeral procession will be held to honor the martyrs who sacrificed their lives for the sake of defending Iraq.
The mass grave where the remains of 23 martyrs were discovered is one of 7 graves in Karbala. The Ministry of Human Rights said they will soon begin new excavations based on reports of new mass graves discovered near the holy city of Karbala. After digging up the graves, the remains will be reburied at the Martyrs Cemetery.
There are other mass graves. We hope to begin the excavation process soon. Today we held a funeral procession to honor the 23 heroes in Karbala. The next step is to gather reports and data to help identify these victims whose remains were discovered in this mass grave.
In a highly decorated funeral procession, the residents of Karbala bid farewell to a new wave of Iraq's martyrs. The martyrs' families can now hold prayers and shed tears on their graves following decades of oppression by the former regime. From the holy city of Karbala, Hussein Mohammed, Iraqiya.
Iran's intelligence minister says the leader of Jundullah terrorist group was at a U.S. base in Afghanistan 24 hours before his capture. Abdul Malik Rigi was arrested by the Iranian security forces while traveling on board a plane from Dubai to Kyrgyzstan.
This is a man who was Iran's most wanted fugitive. Abdul Malik Rigi is now under custody in Iran. 30 years old Abdul Malik Rigi has claimed responsibility for launching deadly attacks against Iranian civilians and officials. Abdul Malik was arrested 24 hours after he was seen at the U.S. military base in Afghanistan. Iran's intelligence minister Haydar Mosley said the capture was a great defeat for the U.S. and UK.
The arrest of Abdul Malik Rigi is a great defeat for the U.S. and Britain in confronting the Iranian nation, and this clearly shows the terrorist nature of these powers.
According to Iran's intelligence minister, Abdul Malik Rigi had even been issued an Afghan passport by the Americans, traveled to EU member states, and met with a NATO commander back in April 2008.
He was arrested after 5 months of undercover operations. This is his photo at a U.S. military base in Afghanistan, taken 24 hours before his arrest.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ramin Mehmanparas, confirming the arrest, said this is another disgrace for countries who claim human rights, a reference to the United States.
The important point is that he had violated all human issues and killed many people in a Muslim-dominated region. He also had plans to create chaos and insecurity in the country. He was supported by the Americans.
Iran has also detained Rigi's brother Abdul Hamid, who is currently on a death row. Abdul Hamid has also said the Jundullah group received orders from the United States to carry out attacks inside Iran. The group has carried out mass murder, armed robbery, kidnapping, acts of sabotage and bombings. They have targeted civilians and government officials as well as all ranks of Iran's military. In their latest attack, which occurred on October 18, 2009, more than 40 Iranians were killed, among them 15 members of the IRGC, including top commanders, in addition to several tribal leaders in the border region of Pishin, located in Iran's southeastern province of Sistan Baluchistan.
With the pictures displayed from Rigi's apprehension, Iran sends out a message to the US and Britain that no covert activity will be missed by the watchful eyes of its intelligence forces. Sama Kujuri, Press TV, Tehran.
Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says the nation will stand by regional countries in case of any possible attack by Israel. Ahmadinejad warned that Tel Aviv is being provoked into attacking its neighbors. Ahmadinejad made the remarks while addressing crowds of people in the northeastern town of Birzhan. He further referred to Iran's nuclear energy program. Ahmadinejad said Iran has mastered the uranium enrichment technology. He stressed that Tehran is resolved to use all domestic capacities for the nation's dignity. The president, however, noted that Iran welcomes a fair interaction with other countries in terms of its nuclear program. Meanwhile, he warned against any attack on Iran. Ahmadinejad said any aggression against the nation will be met with a crushing response. Now, the U.S. Defense Secretary says Europe's growing aversion to military force means the NATO alliance is facing a crisis. Robert Gates says European countries have failed to invest in defense for years. Addressing NATO officers, Gates said that chronically low defense spending is damaging operations in Afghanistan. He also warned that NATO's budget shortfall was a symptom of what he called deeper problems. He said the demilitarization of Europe was impeding the achievement of lasting peace in the 21st century. Gates said for years NATO has needed more cargo aircraft and helicopters of all types. His remarks come as NATO officials draft a new strategic vision for the military alliance. Well, 8 years have passed since the U.S.-led invasion of Afghanistan has started, and the U.S. military has seen an upsurge in troop fatalities as Taliban regain influence. Now, according to website iCasualties, the number of U.S. troops killed in Afghanistan has reached 1,000. This year has been the deadliest for U.S. forces with 54 fatalities. It shows a sharp rise over the same period last year. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mike Mullen, has warned of a surge in troop fatalities and harder days to come as the U.S. and NATO forces continue their offensive in Helmand province. Opponents of the Afghan war are planning a vigil in New York City to mark the death, reaching 1,000. Well, Afghanistan's president has changed a law to take total control of a key election body. Hamid Karzai's spokesman says the amendment allows the president to appoint all 5 members of Afghanistan's Electoral Complaints Commission, or ECC. Under the previous law, 3 of the 5 commission members were appointed by the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. In the presidential election held in August, the ECC threw out around 1/3 or 500,000 votes cast for Karzai as fraudulent. The move led to a runoff that was canceled when Karzai's only rival, Abdullah, pulled out. Now, Iran says the assassination of a top Hamas official in Dubai was an act of Israeli state terrorism. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ramin Mehmanparaz made the remark during his weekly press conference. Mehmanparaz also called for the European countries to be held responsible for their alleged role in the assassination of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh. UAE police said the hit squad used passports from Britain, Germany, Ireland, and France to enter Dubai. Mehmanparaz also said the ringleader of Jundullah terrorist group, who has been captured by Iran on Tuesday, has been backed by the United States. On Iran's nuclear program, Mehmanparaz reiterated any nuclear fuel swap with the West must take place on Iran soil.
Joining me now from our Tel Aviv studio to discuss latest developments involving the Dubai assassination is Middle East expert and former Prime Minister's spokesman, Dr. Raanan Gissin. Good evening, Raanan.
Good evening to you and the viewers.
Thank you. Tell me, do you believe that allegations of Israeli use of British passports will cause any real damage to the diplomatic relationship between the two countries?
Well, I don't think so. I think we got to put things in the proper perspective. In the business of the cloak and dagger, you know, in this world where much of the things are done behind scene, the only knowledge and information we have when something happened and it's exposed to the public. And I think the job of the diplomats at this stage is to try and calm down the situation and leave it to the intelligence branches to work out the details. By the way, there's no real evidence that Israel conducted this event. You have speculations, you have pictures, and Dahi Khalfan, Colonel Dahi Khalfan, the commander of the Dubai police, is playing center stage today because he has all those pictures that come up and feed the press, and it feeds the press at the right time because Britain is facing national elections, and that is probably the most propitious time to come up with these stories, and politicians have to respond. So I would say that you will find out in the next few days, as less and less information comes out and the pictures there are no more pictures to come out, that the story will die of a natural death, and to clear up the stage, you'll have the intelligence services of both Great Britain and Israel trying to do the job.
In fact, Raanan, do you believe that today's Daily Mail allegations and the subsequent denials that Mossad sources did in fact provide British MI6 agents with the advanced knowledge of the hit, do you think that will affect future shared intelligence gathering between these two agencies?
No, I think since 2001, since 9/11, there's been strong intelligence cooperation between all the states that share a common interest in fighting international global terrorism, and Britain and Israel also have that kind of strong relations between them. And listen, whoever did the job, you know, did not do a perfect job because it's not a perfect world. But it was a very successful job. I mean, the guy who is the arch-terrorist, Mabhouh, the arch-terrorist who was... Yes, and getting weapons for Hamas and
right.
And conducting all these was taken out, And those who perpetrated, those who did the act itself, got scot-free, and they're not going to appear in the same name or on the same passport in any place in the world in the future. But the question is really the question of what the responsibility of the government of Israel to those people whose name were used in this affair. And I think the government has a responsibility to alleviate their fear and concern and ensure that the security is not jeopardized.
The Regional Conference of the Union for the Mediterranean Project wrapped up its final session with the Cairo Declaration under the auspices of Egyptian First Lady Suzanne Mubarak. The declaration focused on climate change and its influence on the development of Mediterranean countries and women's role in the future. The participating female parliamentarians submitted proposals for regional improvement. On top of these proposals was establishing an organized system for the female Mediterranean parliamentarians to communicate amongst each other, stressing the role of media in helping women's causes.
We, the parliamentarians from 16 Euro-Mediterranean countries, hereby announce the Cairo Declaration.
The Cairo Declaration, which was released at the end of the Regional Conference of the Union for the Mediterranean Project, is being viewed as an effective momentum in response to the hopes and ambitions of women in both northern and southern sides of the Mediterranean.
The need for investment legislation.
The needs for investment and legislation to reduce poverty and overcome food safety fears are essential in order to bring economic benefits to the poor, marginalized, and oppressed. These issues are pressing. We also reiterate the importance of guaranteeing gender equality, formulating special policies and initiatives for equality in the Mediterranean region, and ensuring women's participation in the decision-making process pertaining to the climate change issues.
In addition to the Cairo Declaration, a separate announcement was made during a special session presided over by the chair of the Women's National Council, Suzanne Mubarak. The announcement focused on the role of women and their efforts to achieve peace.
Peace is the only way to achieve security and stability in the region. This, in turn, will help reduce poverty and environmental threats.
Women in this region can work seriously to make changes. Women must seek to activate UN resolutions, especially those pertaining to crimes against women and children, as they are crimes against humanity.
During the final session, the Council received several proposals submitted by female parliamentarians who called for a wider participation of women in the development process.
Setting up a general fund by the Union for the Mediterranean is part of the proposals submitted to the Council. The participants also called for empowering women, as well as establishing a regional project to fight poverty.
The female parliamentarians also visited the Egyptian Shura Council, where they took a first-hand look at the process of development inside the council and attended a parliament session. Lamia Muwafi, Nile TV.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.